No, absolutely not. Get her out of here. The voice, sharp and cold as shattered glass, cut through the hushed reverence of the penthouse office. Isabel Sterling stood silhouetted against the glittering panorama of the city, a queen surveying a kingdom on the verge of collapse. Her posture was rigid, a testament to the immense pressure coiling around her company, her legacy. On the massive obsidian desk before her, a dozen screens glowed with cascading lines of red text, a digital hemorrhage no one could stanch. Miss Sterling, her head of security, a burly man named Harris, stammered, "The lockdown is total. No one is supposed to be on this floor. I don't know how. I don't pay you for what you don't know, Harris. I pay you to prevent this." She gestured vaguely toward the corner of the room, a space cloaked in the deep shadows cast by a marble sculpture. "Fix it." From the shadows, a small whimper answered. Elias Vance, on his hands and knees halfway through polishing the Italian marble floor, froze. He was a ghost in this world of polished steel and whispered power plays, a man paid to be invisible. His gray janitorial uniform was a cloak of anonymity, and for 3 years it had served him well. He kept his head down, his movements silent, his thoughts his own. But he couldn't unhear the sound that had drawn him to this corner in the first place. It was the sound of a child's heartbreak, a language he understood better than any other. He had found the girl, Lily, curled into a ball beneath a sprawling mahogany credenza. Her small frame was shaking with silent sobs. He had seen her before in pictures on the CEO's desk, a smiling, bright-eyed child. The girl huddled in the darkness looked like a pale, faded copy. He had offered her a piece of candy from the stash he kept for his own daughter, Maya. She had flinched at first, then taken it with trembling fingers. It was then that she had whispered the words, a tiny, fragile question aimed not at him, but at the universe. "Why doesn't my mom love me?" The question had hit Elias like a physical blow, echoing in the hollow chambers of his own grief. Before he could formulate a response, the office door had swept open, and the cold fury of Isabel Sterling had descended upon them. Now, as Harris approached the corner with the lumbering gait of a man following an order he disliked, Elias made a decision. He rose slowly, every movement deliberate, placing his body between the security chief and the hiding child. "With respect, sir." Elias's voice was low and calm, a stark contrast to the panic in the room. "She's just scared." Isabel spun around, her eyes, the color of a winter storm, finally focusing on him. It was a look of pure, unadulterated dismissal. He was a piece of furniture that had suddenly spoken. "And who are you?" "Elias Vance. Night crew." "Night crew," she repeated, the words dripping with contempt. "You are fired. Harris, escort Mr. Vance and my daughter out of the building." Just as Harris put a hand on Elias's shoulder, every screen in the office blinked in unison. The red error messages vanished, replaced by a single block of white text, stark against a black background. "Sterlingthorne. Your reign is built on a flawed foundation. We are the architects of your demise. Aklba nilba. Itar tcs ht deflun fnuatoy. You have 24 hours. A collective gasp filled the room. Isabel's face went pale. Her tech chief, a young man named Ben, rushed forward, peering at the screen. "It's a ransom message. It's on every terminal in the network. They've locked us out completely. That last line, it's gibberish. Some kind of cipher." Isabel's formidable composure cracked. She gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. "What is it? What do they want?" "We don't know. The code is... It's not like anything I've ever seen," Ben stammered, frantically typing on a tablet. "It's a mess." From behind Harris, Elias spoke again, his voice still quiet but imbued with an authority that made everyone turn. "It's not gibberish," he said, his eyes fixed on the screen. "It's an anagrammatic cipher with a phonetic key. They're repeating the central message." He looked directly at Isabel, his gaze unwavering. "It says, Black and Able, the architect sees the flawed foundation. Silence. Utter, profound silence. Ben stared at him, mouth agape. Harris lowered his hand from Elias's shoulder. Isabel's eyes narrowed, a flicker of disbelief warring with a spark of desperate curiosity. How could you possibly know that?" she demanded. Elias's expression remained unreadable. He had already said too much. He had broken the cardinal rule of his self-imposed exile. Never be noticed. The past was a beast he had starved into dormancy, and he had no intention of waking it. "I'm good with puzzles," he said, the answer wholly inadequate. He turned to leave. "I'll get my things." "Wait." The word was a command, sharp and absolute. Isabel Sterling walked toward him, her heels clicking an imperious rhythm on the marble. She stopped a few feet away, studying him as if he were a complex equation she was determined to solve. The desperation that had momentarily fractured her control was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating focus that had made her a titan of industry. Everyone else out. Now, her executive team, including the bewildered head of security, filed out of the office, casting confused glances at the janitor, who now held the CEO's undivided attention. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing the two of them in the glass-walled cage, high above the sleeping city. The cryptic message still glowed from a dozen screens, a silent, pulsing threat. "Start over," Isabel commanded, her voice low and intense. "Who are you?" Elias met her gaze, a deep weariness settling into his bones. He was a man who had traded a world of secrets and shadows for the simple peace of a mop and bucket, for the quiet joy of his daughter's laughter. He wanted nothing to do with this woman's crisis. "I'm the man you just fired. You are the only person in a building full of supposed geniuses who understood that," she gestured at the screens. "That wasn't a guess. That was a translation. You're not good with puzzles, you're trained." "Where?" He remained silent, his jaw tight. The walls of the office, made almost entirely of glass, suddenly felt suffocating. They offered a stunning view, but they also left one completely exposed. It was a feeling he had spent years trying to forget. He thought of Maya, asleep in her bed, her small face peaceful. She was the reason he scrubbed floors, the reason he endured the invisibility. She was his entire world, the safe harbor he had built from the wreckage of his former life. "I sweep floors. That's all you need to know," he said, his tone final. Isabel circled him slowly, like a predator sizing up its prey. "I have a hostile takeover bid from a rival who seems to know every move I'm going to make before I do. I have a data breach that has paralyzed my entire global network. And I have a threat that my own cybersecurity team calls gibberish. I don't have time for modesty, Mr. Vance. I need what you know. And I need to go home to my daughter." The mention of a child seemed to momentarily break her focus. A flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, for the scene with Lily, crossed her face before being suppressed. "They'll pay you," she said, shifting tactics. "Name your price." "A consulting fee. One night's work. $100,000. Elias almost laughed. The absurdity of it. The woman thought money was the universal key. He had once been in rooms where men moved sums like that with a single word, and he had learned that its value was a fiction. The only thing with real value was a child's safety. "I don't want your money," he said. "Then what do you want?" she asked, a note of genuine confusion in her voice. It was clear she rarely encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with a checkbook. He thought for a moment, his gaze drifting to the corner where her daughter had hidden. He saw the same fear in Isabel's eyes that he had seen in Lily's, just better hidden. It was the fear of losing everything. It was a fear he knew intimately. "Discretion," he finally said. "If I do this, no one knows. My name isn't on any report. I'm not on any payroll. I don't exist. As far as anyone is concerned, your tech team had a sudden stroke of genius." Isabel's eyebrows rose. "You want to be a ghost." "I'm already a ghost," he replied, the words carrying a weight she couldn't possibly understand. "I just want to stay that way, and I work from down there," he nodded toward the floor. "Not up here." A deal. It was a strange one, but it was a deal. She was a pragmatist above all else. Fine. Ghost it is. What do you need? A firewalled laptop, a direct, encrypted line to you and only you, and the raw data packet the intruders left behind. And coffee. A lot of coffee. She nodded, already tapping commands into her personal tablet. I'll have it sent to the janitorial supply closet in sublevel 2. It's private. No cameras, she paused, her analytical gaze sweeping over him one last time. You have 24 hours to give me something, Mr. Vance. Or your next job will be cleaning subway stations. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and turned to leave. As his hand touched the door, she spoke again. Vance. He stopped, his back still to her. The first part of the phrase you deciphered. Black enable. What does that mean? Elias's hand tightened on the doorknob. It was a reference he had hoped she wouldn't catch. A deep-cut linguistic marker. It wasn't just a code. It was a signature. A signature he had seen once before in another life on a mission that had ended in fire and loss. It means the person who did this isn't a stranger, he said, his voice barely a whisper. They're already inside your house. He walked out, leaving Isabel Sterling alone in her glass tower, the reflection of the ominous message staring back at her from the polished surfaces, a new and terrifying thought taking root in her mind. The call was coming from inside the building. The flawed foundation wasn't just in her code. It was in her company. And the janitor was the only one who seemed to know the blueprint. He found the small, windowless supply closet in the concrete heart of the building's subbasement. It smelled of bleach and floor wax, a scent he had come to associate with peace. A brand-new, high-spec laptop sat on a metal shelf next to a commercial-grade coffee machine, as promised. He plugged it in, the hum of the machine a familiar comfort in the sterile silence. Before he began, he pulled out his worn wallet and took out a folded, dog-eared drawing. It was a crayon portrait of him and a little girl with a huge, sunny smile, both holding hands. Stick figures, really, but rendered with a love that was anything but simple. Underneath, in shaky block letters, it read Daddy and Maya Forever. He propped it against the wall next to the laptop. This was his anchor. This was his why. He took a deep breath and opened the encrypted file Isabel had sent. It was the digital calling card the attacker had left behind. To a normal analyst, it was a maelstrom of corrupted data and false trails, a masterpiece of misdirection. But Elias didn't look at code the way others did. He looked for rhythm, for cadence, for the tells and quirks that formed a linguistic fingerprint. Every coder, like every writer, has a voice. He worked for hours, the world shrinking to the glowing screen and the quiet drip of the coffee maker. He stripped away layers of obfuscation, dismantled cryptographic traps, and navigated digital dead ends. It was like slipping into an old, familiar skin. The part of his brain that had been dormant for 3 years sparked back to life, synapses firing in patterns he had tried to forget. He felt a grim satisfaction in it, the clean, cold certainty of the hunt. It was a feeling he both craved and despised. Finally, deep within the file's core, he found it. It wasn't a name or an IP address. It was something far more subtle and infinitely more damning. A ghost fragment. A single line of a transaction log that had been improperly deleted. The deletion algorithm itself was the key. It was overly complex, designed to look like a random data corruption event, but its structure was baroque, ornate. It was an attempt to be too clever. A sign of arrogance. The transaction itself was small. A transfer of $50,000. Routed through a dozen offshore accounts before landing in the coffers of something called the St. Jude Children's Foundation. It was dated 5 years ago. On the surface, it was innocuous, but it was the source of the funds that made Elias's blood run cold. The line item read, St. Benevolent Fund. Authorization, R. Sterling. Robert Sterling, Isabel's father, the revered founder of the company. Elias stared at the line of code, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Black and Abel, it was an Old Testament reference, Cain and Abel. Brother against brother, partner against partner. But the reference was deeper. In some apocryphal texts, it was about a betrayal that poisons the very legacy of a family. The architect sees the flawed foundation. The architect wasn't the hacker. The architect was Robert Sterling himself. The flaw wasn't in the company Isabel had built, but in the one she had inherited. He opened the secure chat line to Isabel. The icon showed she was still active, a lone light in the digital skyscraper. Ghost, I have something. It's not what you think. Sterling, what is it? Ghost. The breach wasn't about stealing data. It was a diversion. The ransom note was a message, meant only for you. Sterling, a message about what? Elias paused, choosing his words carefully. He knew what he was about to say would shatter the woman's world. Ghost, it's about your father. The attack originated from inside, but it's leveraging a vulnerability that's been in your system for years. A ghost ledger. I found a fragment of a transaction he authorized. It leads to a shell company disguised as a charity. This isn't a new problem, Ms. Sterling. It's an old one. The response was immediate and glacial. Sterling, that's impossible. My father was meticulous. He was a man of integrity. You're mistaken. Ghost. The data doesn't make mistakes. The linguistic markers in the code, the choice of cipher, the biblical reference, it all points to a long-simmering personal conflict. A betrayal. The person who did this knows your father's secrets. Sterling, you are a janitor I hired less than 6 hours ago. You are in my basement, making wild accusations against a man you never met. A man who built this entire city. You have found a single accounting error, and you've built a fantasy around it. Elias leaned back, the plastic chair creaking in protest. He had expected this. The denial. The protective wall she threw around her father's memory. It was the same wall he had built around his own past. He knew that the only way through it was with cold, hard logic. Ghost. It's not one error. It's a pattern. The way the data was erased has a signature. Think of it like a forger trying to copy a signature. They can get close, but a trained eye can always spot the hesitation, the places where the pen strokes are unnatural. This is the same. The deletions are unnatural. They bear the signature of one person trying to cover the tracks of another. Your system has two ghosts in it, Ms. Sterling. One is your father. The other is the person who is now trying to frame him for everything. He waited. For a long minute there was no reply. The 3 blinking dots that signified she was typing appeared and disappeared several times. She was at war with herself, her faith in her father battling against her trust in data. Elias knew which one would win. For people like Isabel Sterling, data was scripture. Sterling, prove it. Ghost. Give me access to the archived corporate financials. Everything from the last 10 years. Full, unredacted access. Another pause. Granting that level of access to a stranger, a janitor, was an insane security risk. It was an act of either pure desperation or burgeoning trust. Sterling, you have it. Find me the forger. The chat went dark. Elias looked at the drawing of Maya. He was in deep now, far deeper than he had ever intended. He was no longer just solving a puzzle. He was excavating a tomb, and he was not sure who or what he would find buried inside. This was no longer just a corporate crisis. It was a war over a legacy, and the first shot had been fired years ago. The first twist had been revealed. The hero she worshipped was flawed, and his legacy was the weapon now being used against her. For the next 48 hours, the sub-basement became Elias's universe. The world outside ceased to exist, marked only by the delivery of food trays left silently outside the door and the steady depletion of coffee grounds. He dove into a decade's worth of Sterling Thorne's financial soul, a vast ocean of numbers and projections, acquisitions and losses. To anyone else, it would be an impenetrable wall of data. To Elias, it was a story waiting to be read. He ignored the surface narrative, the soaring profits, the aggressive growth. He looked for the whispers, the footnotes, the quiet little anomalies that an ordinary audit would dismiss as clerical errors. He cross-referenced the ghost ledger entries, he was slowly uncovering with Isabel's direct authorizations from her terminal upstairs. She was his hands, pulling personnel files, cross-referencing expense reports, opening vaults that were sealed even to her own board. They developed a rhythm, a strange, disembodied partnership. He was the mind in the machine. She was the will that made the machine turn. He started with the Shell charity, the St. Jude Children's Foundation. It was real, but the amounts being funneled into it were vastly disproportionate to its actual operational costs. Millions of dollars were vanishing into its accounts, only to be wired out again to a complex web of holding companies. It was a classic money laundering scheme, but executed with uncommon elegance. And it had been running for years, right under her father's nose. Or, as the evidence suggested, with his implicit approval. As he followed the money, a single name kept appearing in the periphery, like a ghost haunting the edges of the frame. Marcus Thorne. Her father's partner and best friend. The man who had been a fixture in Isabel's life since she was a child. The avuncular Uncle Marcus. His digital signature was on dozens of authorizations, co-signing Robert Sterling's transfers to the foundation. But every time Elias got close to a direct link, the trail would go cold, the data expertly scrubbed. Thorne's digital footprint was immaculate. Too immaculate. It was the digital equivalent of a room that had been wiped clean of all fingerprints. The cleanliness itself was the evidence. Ghost. It's Thorne. The message sat on the screen. He had no definitive proof, nothing that would stand up in court, but he had a certainty that went beyond data. He had the shape of the man's shadow. Sterling, Marcus? Don't be ridiculous. He's family. He taught me how to ride a bike. He was my father's most trusted friend. Ghost. Friendship doesn't show up on a balance sheet. Look at the timeline. The siphoning increases dramatically in the 2 years before your father's death. Then, after he dies, the transfers stop completely. A new pattern begins. Small, targeted asset dilutions. Anonymous short-selling of ST stock from untraceable funds. He wasn't just stealing with your father. He was planning to take everything after he was gone. The breach is the final move. Devalue the company, trigger the hostile takeover from his partners at Omnicorp, and install himself as CEO of the new entity. He's not just trying to rob you. He's trying to erase you. Upstairs, in the sterile quiet of her office, Isabel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Elias's words painted a picture of such profound betrayal that her mind refused to accept it. Marcus Thorne, the man who had given the eulogy at her father's funeral. His voice thick with tears. The man who had guided her through her first year as CEO. A steady paternal presence. It was monstrous. It was unbelievable. And yet, it made a terrible kind of sense. The little things she had dismissed. Marcus's insistence that she not look too closely at her father's pet projects, his subtle undermining of her authority in board meetings, always framed as helpful advice. His vocal support for a merger with Omnicorp, a company he claimed was their only salvation. She decided to test the theory. The next morning, she called an emergency meeting of the executive board. She kept the agenda vague, citing only financial irregularities. She watched Marcus as she laid out a sanitized version of the situation, speaking of an external threat and missing funds. He was the picture of calm concern, his brow furrowed, his voice steady as he pledged his full support. He was a masterful actor. But Elias was listening in, patched into the boardroom's audio via a secure link. He wasn't watching Marcus. He was listening to him. He ran Thorne's speech through a vocal stress analysis program he had designed years ago. While the man's macro expressions were controlled, his voice told another story. Micro-tremors, a fractional hesitation before using the word loyalty, a subtle increase in pitch when he mentioned Robert Sterling's name. To the board, he sounded concerned. To Elias, he was screaming his guilt. Ghost. Live feed to Isabel's private tablet. He's lying. Stress indicators are at 87% when he discusses the historical accounts. He's using qualifying phrases. As far as I recall, to the best of my knowledge, he's creating plausible deniability. Isabel's blood ran cold. She looked at the man she had known her entire life and saw, for the first time, a stranger, a predator wearing a familiar mask. She pushed harder, asking a direct question about the St. Jude Foundation. Marcus, you co-signed many of the donations to my father's foundation. Can you walk us through the verification process for those transfers? For the first time, a flicker of something, anger, panic, flashed in Thorne's eyes before being extinguished. Of course, Isabel. But that's ancient history. Perhaps we should focus on the present threat. He was deflecting, shutting it down. The meeting ended with platitudes and promises of an internal investigation, an investigation Thorne himself would oversee. He had turned her own weapon against her. After the meeting, Thorne moved quickly. Within an hour, Isabel found her access to the deep financial archives revoked. An automated message informed her it was a new security protocol enacted by the COO's office to prevent further data breaches. He was locking the doors one by one. He knew she was on to him. The alliance between Isabel and Elias was no longer merely transactional. It was forged in the fire of a shared threat. That night, she broke protocol and went down to the sub-basement herself. She found him staring at his laptop, the glow illuminating the exhaustion etched on his face. The small crayon drawing of the two stick figures was propped next to the screen. "He's blocking me," she said, her voice devoid of its usual authority. She sounded tired, worried. "I know. I saw." She looked at the drawing. "Is that your daughter?" Elias's posture, usually so guarded, softened. "Maya. She's 7-inch. My Lily is 7. Isabel said quietly. A chasm of silence opened between them, filled with the unspoken realities of their different lives. He was a father who had given up everything for his child. She was a mother who was terrified she was giving her child nothing. "He won't stop at the company," Elias said, his voice low and grim. "Men like Thorne, when they feel cornered, they don't just fight back. They lash out. They find your weakness, and they press on it until it breaks." He turned from the screen to look at her, and for the first time, she saw the ghost of a different man in his eyes. Someone harder, colder, more dangerous. "He knows you're looking. Now he's going to start looking for who's helping you. You and your daughter need to be careful." The warning hung in the air, heavy and prophetic. The game had shifted. It was no longer a hunt for evidence. It was a race against a man who had everything to lose and was willing to do anything to protect his secrets. The threat was no longer confined to the digital world. It was about to step into the light. The day started like any other in Elias's meticulously structured life. He dropped Maya at school, her small hand clutching his until the very last second. He watched until she disappeared inside the brick building, a daily ritual that settled the constant, low-grade anxiety thrumming in his chest. Then, he went to his small, sparse apartment, slept for precisely 6 hours, and prepared for his shift at the tower. It was a life of quiet routine, a fortress built to keep the chaos of the world at bay. That evening, as he prepared to leave for work, his phone rang. It was Maya's after-school program. "Mr. Vance." The voice of the young supervisor, normally so cheerful, was tight with concern. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but there was a little incident a while ago. I thought you should know." Elias's blood turned to ice. "An incident? Is Maya okay?" "Oh yes, she's fine. She's right here playing with Legos. It was just, a man came to pick her up about an hour ago. He said he was her uncle. An Uncle Marcus." The name hit Elias like a physical impact, knocking the air from his lungs. He gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, his knuckles turning white. "He had an ID," the supervisor continued, her voice trembling slightly. "It looked real, and he knew Maya's name, her teacher's name, everything. But he wasn't on your approved pickup list, of course. And, I don't know, he just gave me a bad feeling. When I told him I had to call you to verify, he got angry and left in a hurry. I got the license plate of his car." Elias's mind was racing, processing the information with terrifying speed. Thorne hadn't just found out about him. He had bypassed the layers of digital erasure, the false identities, the life Elias had so carefully buried. He had found Maya. He had stood in the same building as his daughter. The fortress walls had been breached. The one thing in the universe he could not bear to be threatened was now a target. A primal rage, cold and absolute, surged through him, momentarily drowning out the fear. He thanked the supervisor, his voice a strained whisper, told her he was on his way, and hung up. For a moment, he just stood there, shaking, the quiet of his apartment suddenly deafening. The beast he had starved for 3 years was awake and roaring. He didn't bother with the janitor's uniform. He threw on a dark jacket, grabbed his keys, and drove toward the Sterling Thorn Tower, breaking every speed limit. He didn't use the service entrance. He strode through the main lobby, his face a mask of grim purpose, ignoring the confused looks from the security guards who recognized him but had never seen him look this way. He took the executive elevator straight to the penthouse. He burst into Isabel's office without knocking. She was on a conference call, her voice sharp and commanding. She looked up, startled, her eyes widening at the sight of him. He was no longer the quiet, unassuming janitor. The man standing before her was radiating a coiled, dangerous energy. "Get off the phone," he said. The words were not a request. She ended the call without a word, her gaze locked on his. "Elias? What's wrong?" "He went after my daughter." He clipped the words out, each one a shard of ice. He told her what happened at the after-school program. As he spoke, he saw the color drain from her face. The corporate battle, the billions of dollars, all of it evaporated, leaving only the raw, visceral terror that every parent understands. "My God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Elias, I'm so sorry. This is my fault." The guilt in her eyes was profound. Her war had spilled over, and his child was caught in the crossfire. "It's not your fault," he said, his voice flat. "It's his, and he just made the biggest mistake of his life." He strode over to her desk and leaned on it, his eyes boring into hers. "He thinks he's cornered an analyst, a janitor. He has no idea who he's dealing with. I've spent the last 3 years of my life becoming invisible to protect her. I buried a name, a history, a whole life because of men like him. Men who believe they are above consequences." This was it. The moment the walls came down. He had to tell her, not everything, but enough. Enough for her to understand the forces she was dealing with. "My name isn't really Elias Vance. That's a fiction. I used to work for a specialized branch of state intelligence. Forensic linguistics and data warfare. We hunted people like Thorn. We dismantled their networks from the inside out." He paused, the memories washing over him, bitter and sharp. "My wife was my partner. We were on an operation in Brussels. An insider just like Thorn compromised the mission. He sold us out for money. My wife—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. He didn't need to finish. The raw pain on his face was enough. "She was killed in the ambush that followed. They thought I died with her. I let them believe it. I took my daughter and I vanished. I became a janitor because no one ever sees the janitor. It's the perfect cover. I chose to be a ghost to keep Maya safe." He finally looked up at her, and the grief in his eyes was a raw, open wound. "Thorn just threatened the only thing I have left of her. He just declared war on a man who has already lost everything once. He's not going to win." Isabel was speechless. The quiet, observant man who polished her floors was a trained intelligence operative, a ghost hiding from a past filled with unimaginable trauma. The pieces all fit: his skill, his secrecy, his fierce, protective love for his daughter. Her own problems seemed small in comparison. Her guilt transformed into a cold, hard resolve. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady. She was no longer just a client or an ally. She was his partner. This was their fight now. "We stop reacting," Elias said, his voice now devoid of all emotion, replaced by a chilling calm. "We stop looking for what he did. We start hunting for what he's doing now. He's overconfident. He thinks he's scared me off. He'll get sloppy. I need you to give me the tools to watch him. Anything, she said without hesitation. Whatever you need. I need access to the tower's internal surveillance network. Audio and visual. I need to be able to track his company car, his phone. And I need you to create a diversion. Something big. Something that will occupy all his attention for the next 48 hours. Isabel's mind, a formidable weapon in its own right, was already working. I'll launch a surprise forensic audit of his entire division. Effective immediately. It will be chaos. He'll be buried in paperwork and meetings. It will be the perfect smokescreen. Good. Elias nodded. He's hiding something physical. A hard drive, a ledger, a server. The proof isn't just digital. Men like him always keep an insurance policy. A hard copy. I'm going to find it. He turned to leave, his mission clear. He would move Maya to a safe house, a contingency location he had maintained for years. Then he would return and unleash the full extent of the skills he had tried so hard to forget. The hidden king was done hiding. The hunt had begun. The next 2 days were a blur of controlled chaos and silent, focused intensity. Isabel, true to her word, descended upon Marcus Thorne's division like a wrathful goddess. She announced a full-scale, top-to-bottom forensic audit, effective immediately. Teams of accountants, lawyers, and IT specialists swarmed the offices, demanding files, records, and access logs. It was a corporate blitzkrieg, and Thorne was at the epicenter, forced to spend every waking moment managing the fallout, putting out fires, and maintaining his facade of cooperative leadership. He was pinned down, exactly as Elias had intended. Meanwhile, Elias transformed the sub-basement supply closet into a veritable command center. He had moved Maya to a small, nondescript house upstate, leaving her in the care of a woman named Elena, the widow of his former commanding officer and one of only 2 people on Earth who knew his real identity. With Maya safe, he was free to focus, to become the weapon he had been trained to be. He tapped into the tower's security systems with an ease that was terrifying. He was a ghost in the building's electronic nervous system, seeing through every camera, hearing through every microphone. He tracked Thorne's movements, his calls, his keystrokes. He watched as Thorne grew increasingly agitated, the pressure of the audit cracking his smooth veneer. Late one night, as they worked in their separate spheres, connected by the encrypted chat, their professional alliance began to bleed into something more personal. Sterling, he's starting to unravel. He made 3 mistakes in the quarterly report projections today. Marcus Thorne doesn't make mistakes. Ghost. He's distracted. He's worried about what the auditors will find, but he's more worried about what they won't find. The thing he's hidden. Sterling, how do you do it? Live like this? Hiding. Always looking over your shoulder. The question was more intimate than anything she had asked before. Elias looked at the crayon drawing of Maya, his anchor in the storm. Ghost. You don't live. You survive. You build a routine. You focus on one thing that matters. For me, it's her. Making her breakfast. Reading her bedtime stories. That's the real world. This is just noise. Sterling, I feel like I live in the noise. The company. It was my father's whole world. I thought if I could run it, make it bigger, better, I thought he'd be proud. That I could prove myself to a man who's already gone. It was a startling confession, a crack in the armor of the Ice Queen. Elias found himself typing a response he hadn't planned. Ghost. My wife, Anna. She used to say I was married to the job, that I was hunting shadows while the real world was passing me by. She was right. I didn't see it until it was too late. A new kind of silence stretched between them, one of shared understanding. They were 2 people who had allowed their legacies, one inherited, one escaped, to isolate them. In their strange, shared foxhole, they were, for the first time, not entirely alone. On the second day of the audit, Elias got the break he was looking for. Under immense pressure, Thorne made a mistake. He used his company phone to make a short, panicked call to a number Elias didn't recognize. The call lasted only 10 seconds, and the audio was encrypted, but it was enough. Elias traced the call's destination. It wasn't a person. It was a receiver linked to a high-security, private data storage facility in a nondescript industrial park across the river, Iron Mountain Solutions. This was it, the off-site location, the place he kept his secrets. Ghost, I found it. Private data vault in Queens. He just pinged their network. He's getting nervous. He might be planning to move or destroy the evidence. Sterling, how do we get inside? The security at those places is impossible. Ghost, we don't need to get inside. I just need to get close. And I need him out of the way. Can you keep him occupied for at least 3 hours tonight? Off-site, away from his computers. Isabel didn't hesitate. Sterling, I'll schedule an emergency dinner with our primary investors at the aviary. It's on the other side of town. Attendance will be mandatory. He'll be there from 7 p.m. until at least 10. Ghost, that's my window. As darkness fell over the city, their plan was set in motion. Isabel, dressed in an elegant but severe black dress, hosted a dinner for the company's most powerful shareholders, with Marcus Thorne seated at her right hand, a guest of honor in a gilded cage. He played his part perfectly, charming and confident, but Isabel could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept darting to his phone. Across the river, Elias, clad in black, parked a nondescript van 2 blocks from Iron Mountain Solutions. The building was a featureless concrete cube, promising nothing but security. He wouldn't try a physical breach. That was clumsy and loud. He was going to perform a digital heist. From his van, he deployed a small, custom-built drone, which he flew to the roof of the facility. The drone wasn't carrying a camera. It was carrying a sophisticated Wi-Fi pineapple, a device designed to intercept and spoof wireless signals. He located the facility's main network hub and activated the device. It began broadcasting a signal that mimicked the facility's own secure network. Inside the building, Thorne's private server, like all the others, would automatically ping the network for status updates every few minutes. Elias was betting that eventually, the server would connect to his stronger, closer signal by mistake. It was a digital waiting game. For an hour, nothing. Then a blip on his screen. Connection. He was in. It was a fragile, tenuous link, but it was enough. He couldn't download terabytes of data, but he could search. He could read. He knew Thorne's digital signature, the way he structured his files, the keywords he would use. He began to hunt. He bypassed Thorne's personal encryption with a brute force attack supercharged by a keylogger he'd managed to install on Thorne's office computer earlier that day. The digital locks fell away, and he found himself staring into the abyss of Marcus Thorne's secret life. It was all there. Decades of corruption. The unsanitized ledgers showing the full extent of the embezzlement, with meticulous notes detailing how he had implicated Robert Sterling in the scheme, creating a perfect posthumous scapegoat. There were emails and encrypted chats with the executives at Omnicorp, methodically planning the hostile takeover, every step outlined. It was a comprehensive record of a breathtakingly audacious betrayal. But then he found a folder labeled Contingency. His blood ran cold. He opened it. Inside was a single scanned document. It was a letter, handwritten, on Robert Sterling's personal letterhead. It was dated the day before his death. Elias read the words, and the full, monstrous truth of the conspiracy crashed down on him. It wasn't a story of partnership and betrayal. It was a story of discovery and murder. The letter was a confession, written by Isabel's father. In it, he admitted that he had just discovered the full extent of Marcus's theft. He wrote of his shame, his guilt for being so blind, his heartbreak at being betrayed by the man he considered a brother. The letter ended with a single, chilling sentence. I am going to confront him tonight. I don't know what will happen, but I cannot let this stand. If anything happens to me, give this to Isabel. Let her know the truth. Thorne had never delivered the letter. Robert Sterling's death, ruled an accident. A heart attack while driving home late from the office, was no accident. Thorne had murdered him. This letter was his trophy, his insurance policy, the ultimate leverage he held over the Sterling legacy. It was the final, damning piece of proof. Elias downloaded the file, the progress bar moving with agonizing slowness. He saved it, encrypted it, and sent it through a series of anonymous relays until it landed in a secure Dropbox only he and Isabel could access. He had the villain unmasked. He had the weapon. Now all that was left was the final confrontation. The air in the Sterling Thorne boardroom crackled with a tension that was almost palpable. The emergency board meeting, called by Isabel at the ungodly hour of 6 a.m., had drawn every member from their beds, their faces a mixture of confusion and irritation. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of the table opposite Isabel, his expression one of weary patience, the benevolent uncle indulging his niece's latest whim. He thought he had won. The audit had been a chaotic but ultimately fruitless endeavor. He believed his secrets were safe. Isabel stood, her composure absolute. She looked nothing like a woman on the verge of losing her company. She looked like an executioner. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "For the past week, this company has been under attack. We have been led to believe this was an external threat. We were wrong." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. She looked directly at Marcus Thorne. "The threat has been in this room with us all along." A murmur went through the board members. Thorne chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "Isabel, with all due respect, you're exhausted. This pressure is getting to you. Perhaps we should postpone this until—" "I don't think so, Marcus," she said, cutting him off. Her voice was steel. She nodded to someone standing by the door. The lights in the boardroom dimmed, and the massive screen behind her, usually reserved for quarterly earnings reports, flickered to life. The first image that appeared was a transaction log. A direct transfer of $2 million from a Sterling Thorne holding account to a shell corporation controlled by Omnicorp. The authorization signature was Marcus Thorne's. Thorne's smile faltered. "That's a fabrication. My signature has been forged." "Has it?" Isabel countered. The screen changed, displaying a string of encrypted emails between Thorne and the CEO of Omnicorp, laying out the final stages of the hostile takeover in meticulous detail. The linguistic analysis report scrolled beside it, highlighting the identical syntactical patterns between the emails and the original ransom note. Thorne was on his feet now, his face flushing with anger. "This is slander. It's a pathetic attempt to deflect from your own mismanagement. This evidence is inadmissible, clearly manufactured by whatever high-priced consultant you've hired to save your skin." The room was in an uproar. Board members were shouting, demanding explanations. Through it all, Isabel remained an island of calm. "My consultant is very good," she said quietly. "But the final piece of evidence wasn't something he had to manufacture. It was something you kept." The image on the screen changed one last time. It was the letter, her father's final words, scanned in high resolution, his elegant handwriting clear for all to see. "I have discovered the full extent of Marcus's theft. I am going to confront him tonight. If anything happens to me, give this to Isabel." A profound, deathly silence fell over the boardroom. Every eye was fixed on the screen, then on the face of Marcus Thorne. His mask of civility and power shattered, leaving only the raw, ugly truth beneath. His face, which had been red with anger, was now ashen. He was exposed. He was ruined. In that moment of absolute stillness, something in him broke. With a guttural roar of pure animal rage, he lunged across the table, his target not the evidence, but Isabel herself. He was a cornered beast, striking out in a final, desperate act of violence. The board members recoiled in shock. Her security guards, positioned at the door, were too far away. But someone else was closer. From the shadows near the wall, a figure moved with a speed and precision that was utterly at odds with his station. Elias Vance, who had slipped into the room unnoticed minutes before, wearing his simple janitor's uniform, intercepted Thorne mid-lunge. It wasn't a brawl. It was a deconstruction. There was no wasted motion. Elias sidestepped Thorne's clumsy charge, using the man's own momentum against him. A single, precise strike to the brachial plexus nerve in Thorne's shoulder. The man's arm went limp. A controlled sweep of his leg took Thorne's balance. He twisted, guiding Thorne's fall, and in a fluid, unbroken sequence, had him face down on the polished mahogany table, his one good arm pinned behind his back. It was over in less than 3 seconds. It was quiet, brutally efficient, and utterly definitive. The hidden king had revealed himself not with a crown, but with a quiet display of absolute competence. Security finally swarmed forward, pulling the sputtering, defeated Thorne to his feet. As they hauled him away, his eyes met Elias's. In them, Elias saw not hatred, but pure, uncomprehending shock. The shock of a predator who had just been taken down by what he thought was prey. The boardroom was a tableau of stunned faces. The members of the board stared, not at Isabel, but at the janitor who stood calmly by the table, straightening his uniform. In that moment, they all understood. This quiet, invisible man was the architect of their salvation. The aftermath was a maelstrom of police statements, legal proceedings, and frantic damage control. The news of Marcus Thorne's arrest for embezzlement, corporate espionage, and the murder of Robert Sterling sent shockwaves through the financial world. But within the walls of the Sterling Thorne Tower, a new order was being forged from the chaos. The board, shaken but resolute, rallied around Isabel with a newfound, genuine respect. She had not only saved the company from a hostile takeover, she had avenged her father and purged a rot that had festered at the heart of their institution for decades. She had proven herself not just an heir, but a true leader. In the midst of it all, Elias prepared to disappear again. His job was done. The threat was neutralized. He planned to collect his final paycheck, for his janitorial duties, of course, and slip away, back to his life of quiet anonymity with Maya. The world of corporate power and violence was not his. He had only been a visitor. He was in the sub-basement, packing his few personal belongings, a spare uniform, a coffee mug, the crayon drawing of him and Maya, when Isabel found him. She stood in the doorway of the supply closet, the harsh fluorescent light a stark contrast to the opulence of her usual surroundings. She looked at the small, cramped space where he had waged and won a war for her company's soul. "Leaving without saying goodbye?" she asked, her voice soft. "My work is done," Elias said, not looking at her. "Your company is safe." "You saved more than the company," she said. "You saved me from a lie I'd built my entire life around. I was so determined to honor my father's legacy that I never saw the man himself. You gave me the truth. That's a debt I can never repay." "No debt," he said, finally turning to face her. "I did it to protect my daughter. Thorne was a threat that wouldn't have stopped at you." "I know," she took a step into the room. "Which is why you can't leave." He raised an eyebrow. "You can't stop me." "I'm not trying to," she said. "I'm trying to hire you." She held out a slim, formal folder. "This is a proposal for a new division at Sterling Thorne, Corporate Risk and Intelligence. It will answer directly to me. Its mandate will be to identify and neutralize threats, both internal and external. I want you to build it, to run it. Your real name, a public role." Elias stared at the folder, then at her. It was everything he had run from. A name, position, visibility. "I can't," he said, the words tasting like ash. "To the world, that man is dead. To be him again, it would put a target on my daughter's back." "No," Isabel countered, her voice firm, passionate. "Hiding puts a target on her back. Tells men like Thorne that you're vulnerable, that you're prey. What you did in that boardroom, that wasn't hiding. That was protecting. This position gives you the resources, the power to protect her properly. To build a fortress of light around her, not one of shadows." She was right. He knew she was right. Hiding hadn't kept Maya safe. It had only delayed the inevitable. The world had found him anyway. Maybe the only way to truly protect her was to stop running and start building. To reclaim the identity he had shed and use it for good. He looked at her, at the strength and integrity that radiated from her, and he saw a partner. He saw a future he hadn't allowed himself to imagine. He took the folder. "I'll need a good dental plan," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips for the first time. Isabel's answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I think we can manage that." Later that evening, they stood together in her silent, cavernous office. The city lights glittered below them. The glass walls no longer felt like a cage, but a window full of possibility. The tension that had simmered between them, the unspoken connection forged in crisis, was now a quiet, comfortable presence in the room. "I have to go," he said. "I have to go pick up my daughter." "I know," she replied. "And I have to go home and read a bedtime story to mine." Their eyes met, and in that shared glance, a silent promise was made. Promise of new beginnings, of two broken families finding a way to become whole again. He was no longer just a janitor, and she was no longer just a CEO. They were Elias and Isabel, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. 6 months later, the Saturday afternoon sun spilled through the leaves of the old oak trees in Central Park, dappling the grass in shifting patterns of light and shadow. The sound of children's laughter filled the air. Elias Vance, dressed in casual jeans and a soft cotton shirt, pushed a swing higher and higher. In the seat, a little girl with bright eyes and a wide, sunny smile squealed with delight. "Higher, Daddy, higher," Maya cried, her voice full of pure, uncomplicated joy. Elias smiled, a real, easy smile that reached his eyes. The haunted, weary look was gone, replaced by a deep, settled peace. He was the head of a multimillion-dollar corporate intelligence division, a respected and powerful figure in his industry. But in this moment, he was just a father, performing the most important job in the world. "Here they come," he said, slowing the swing. Maya looked up and beamed. Lily, Isabel Sterling and her daughter, Lily, were walking toward them across the lawn. Like Elias, Isabel was transformed. Gone were the severe business suits and the icy demeanor. She wore a simple summer dress, her hair was down, and she was holding her daughter's hand. Lily, no longer the pale, sad child hiding under a desk, skipped ahead, her face alight with excitement. The two girls met in a flurry of hugs and giggles, immediately engrossed in a whispered, urgent conversation about the merits of the slide versus the monkey bars. Isabel came to stand beside Elias, her shoulder brushing his. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching their daughters. A small, colorful piece of paper was clutched in Lily's hand. "She made something for you," Isabel said quietly. Lily ran over to Elias and proudly held up the paper. It was a crayon drawing. For stick figures stood in a line on a patch of bright green grass under a huge, smiling sun. A tall man, a tall woman, and two small girls. They were all holding hands. "It's us," Lily announced. "A family." Elias felt a tightness in his throat. He crouched down to her level. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Lily. Thank you." She beamed and then ran off with Maya toward the playground. Elias stood up, the drawing in his hand. He looked at Isabel, his heart full of a feeling he thought he had buried forever. "She's happy," he said. "I haven't seen her this happy since, for a long time." "They both are," Isabel replied, her eyes shining. She looked at him, her gaze soft and full of gratitude. "You didn't just save my company, Elias. You saved me from becoming a ghost in my own life. You showed me what was real." "You did the same for me," he said. He had stepped out of the shadows, not into danger, but into the warm, brilliant light of a life he never thought he could have again. He had reclaimed his name, his purpose, and his heart. He reached out and took her hand. Felt natural, felt right, felt like coming home. Together, they watched their children play, two families, once broken by secrets and loss, now joined together by truth and hope, building a new foundation, one not of glass and steel, but of love. Sometimes, the greatest strength isn't found in the boardroom, but in the quiet courage to protect what matters most. Sometimes, the person who seems the most invisible is the one who sees everything clearly. We build walls around our hearts to keep out the pain, but it's only when we let someone else see the flawed foundations that we can truly begin to build something that will last. Have you ever found an unexpected hero in your own life, or a hidden strength within yourself? Share your story in the comments below. And for more tales of courage and redemption,